Hi guys. Here I am live, and hopefully this will work out okay. Uh, it's 8:20 in the evening, and I'm outside. So I know that the sun's setting earlier these days. So and potentially have a big topic I want to talk about. But it's funny, that the first. I think this is the first uh, talk on various subjects video that I've done in a little while. So I figured that this this is something we can do. And so, what I want to talk about, as you see from the title, is sort of how do we speak today. I put free speech because it's more of like it's a better cognitive term for figuring out kind of the topic here, and it's a general theme that I've been thinking about for a while. How do we speak today? How do we speak today? So we know that a lot of the things that people are saying today, you can't say, you get in trouble for, cancel culture, all that stuff. And this is an important thing, and it's not just something that, of course, affects political people, comedians. It affects all of us, and in fact, it's been creeping for a while. It's been creeping and getting stronger for a while now, and uh, as time goes by, the strategies get more and more clever for disarming people, for invalidating people's perspectives. Um, it's unfortunate that I would say it's the untalented, it's the unlearned, it's the unpromising or whatever. It's who are wielding these powerful cards, and when they use words like racism and privilege and all that stuff. Um, what can you say? Well, it's not a new set of it's not a new playbook. It's the old playbook of the Marxists, and Um, this is a Marxist movement, and that's in case anybody's surprised by that. That you know, you might be surprised that that word is being thrown around a lot, like Marxist. Um, People in academia have known about this for a long time. That this is what it is. This is where it's coming from. But it's only now with people like Jordan Peterson and different other commentators who have named it, and Marxism has been named and shamed, and that's a good thing. You can't know your enemy unless it first has a name. And it is the old name. You can say it's a lot of things. For a little while in the U.S., and it used to bother me, they used to call it liberalism. It's liberals. It's the liberals. It's not. And American commentators have finally figured that out. Have finally picked up on the really important difference. Um, Left wing is fine, but liberal is not left wing. Um, Liberal refers to the tradition of Locke and the tradition of free speech, free practice of religion, private property, all that stuff. So the bedrock, really, of the British parliamentary system and now the American system, and supposedly the Canadian system. It's not the same thing when you look eastward, not even France. France doesn't have the common law tradition. It doesn't have the uh, parliamentary tradition, and it's not based on common law. It's based upon Napoleonic law, which is Roman law. Anyway, but we don't want to get too distracted by that. And yes, and those are important factors, but the most important factor is that this is Marxist. It is hermeneutic of suspicion. That means that it's cynical, it's skeptical, it's everything's about power dynamics. Now, obviously, power plays an important role, and in lots of things and in everything. But power, the problem with Marxism is that it has no matrix for distinguishing between power and value. Marxism has no value. It's not, and that's not a value judgment. That's just an observation that uh, the only calculus in a Marxist system, it's a closed system, because if everything's about power, then when the right people get the power, everything's still about power. Okay, so if the proletariat seizes the means of production, then they're the powerful, and it's a closed system. You can't say they're using power well or poorly. It's just power. Okay, so it's just the people you want to have power now have the power, whereas the people who weren't, you didn't want to have the power, had the power in the past. So the this no, so let's look at sort of, I mean, again, I'm just giving my general thoughts first about this kind of thing. Marxism is, of course, it's a philosophy of resentment, meaning that it is a philosophy that is espoused by the have-nots, and it is aspirational, so that they want to uh, level the playing field. But the playing field is only something they're interested in because it's beneficial to them. So, uh, equal opportunity, equal resources, uh, equal leisure, equal opportunities are only good for me because I have less than other people right now. I'm below the average. Okay, so and this is something that the reason why Marxism is so popular with young people, and if you look at if you look at the people who are causing the violence, like people like the Antifa and so on, it's young people, and it is, as you can judge from the arrest pictures and so on, it's extremely uneducated, and like these are the people that are used and abused by the higher ups control pulling the strings. So these are the brown shirts or whatever, uh, who are who are being used as cannon fodder, so to speak. And so a lot of the times when you see the mug shots of the Antifa members who are arrested, these people are virtually mentally retarded. Um, and another thing is the common how common transgenderism is amongst Antifa and so on. So these are distractions, these are ploys, these are ways for wealthy people, and in this case, the wealthy people means the Democrat elite, and in Canada, it's the Liberal Party. But in the US, it's the Democratic elite, people like Maxine Waters and um, Joe Biden and all these people um, who are the extremely wealthy and getting wealthier all the time, who are using a language that doesn't reflect their own experience. So they'll talk about defunding the police while having extra police paid for by the state for them. And that's always the case. So, and they'll talk about, good public education and so on, when their children don't even go to public schools, they go to private schools. They'll talk about carbon footprints when they're the people who have the highest carbon footprint. Um, so it's a little rich in that case, in that for instance, open borders doesn't mean open the borders of the gated community. Okay, so the hypocrisy is very easy to spot, but what do you do about it? And how can you deal with that when people seem so willing to go along, so quick to go along with the snow job? Um, okay, so we're not talking about equality, we're talking about free speech. And free speech is by the liberals and the centrists and the tradition. So conservatives now are liberal, or liberals now are conservative, because of the way that political politics has progressed since, say, the 70s or the 80s. So the left wing now are centrists, and this new radical left are Bolshevik extremists. So now, people who were concerned about free speech when I was growing up, it was people who were talking about the right of, for instance, uh, heavy metal bands to use evocative language, to use whatever satanic language or so on. So the liberals then were pro free speech, and the Christian conservatives were the people they were fighting against. Well, that dynamic has been changed because the whole parliament has shifted to the left. So who talks about traditional marriage anymore? This was a conservative staple. The family was a conservative staple. It's a position that's been almost completely abandoned now. Um, there's a vocal minority of Christians who continue to talk about importance of the family, but they've lost very very badly in this transition uh, these from the transition from where the rights of gays has been consolidated in law, and now we're moving on to other topics, and we're moving so far from the Christian tradition that we're saying that now it's not just the Christian morality of heterosexual sex confined to marriage. It's now that men and women um, are no longer terms of reference. They're no longer concrete terms of reference because of transsexualism or transgenderism. So you see that the shift to the left there, away from tradition, away from the Christian tradition, has been very strong, especially in the last 10 years. Um, and the old thing was that up until, I don't know, I guess 20 years ago now, it was 10 years. People used to say 10 years ago, but I think it's 20 years ago now. People like Barack Obama were against gay marriage. People like Hillary Clinton were against gay marriage, and Bill Clinton. So now the discourse has changed, and nobody, and practically not even conservatives can say that anymore. Okay, so even people on the extreme right in the discourse, they don't tend to speak about traditional marriage. Um, so there you have it. That's something of the switch. Now I want to talk about. I want to give some few examples to how my free speech has been impeded over the last 20 years, I guess. And it's funny. It's interesting how the how things change, but the more things change, the more things stay the same, and that's sort of one of the essential things that I believe is that human nature has always been this way. So it's who is doing the censoring, that changes, and the reasons why they do the censoring, the ideological reasons why they do the censoring changes, but people don't change. So censoring will always be a human activity. Okay, so whether you're talking about the Grand Inquisitor of Dostoevsky, who was wanted everyone to behave in a certain way, um, or whether you're talking now about, for instance, in Canada, human rights tribunals and so on, the people who are doing the censoring changed and the reasons, but the psychology remains in place because it's all too human, so to speak. Okay? People don't love reason. People don't love free speech. People don't love debate. People don't love equality. They love power. Okay, I'm going to give a few examples from my as I said, last 20 years. So the first example I want to give was, I mean, most people who know me personally know that I'm a blowhard, and I'm less a blowhard now than I was because, well, I used to believe that it made a difference. I used to believe that it made a difference what people believe, what people said, what people believe, that free speech, that people could change their minds, that people were open to reason, that people were open to debate. Now I don't believe that anymore. I believe that the vast majority of people aren't open to discussion, free, fair discussion. Most people aren't, and that's sad because I was born, I was ideologically created by Plato and Plato's dialogues. And Plato's whole system is a dialogical system, means that truth is created in a process of conversation. Okay. That's my birth. I was born reading Plato when I was 15, 16 years old. Um, and the year was 1991, 1990, 1991. So that's when I was born. Okay. So being young, brash, intelligent, um, and having oppositional defiance disorder, that's my wife tells me, and I kind of believe it. Um, I was ready to believe that what you say can make a difference and that you can build something great, that the intellect can build something great. And you only had to look around the world and see that indeed, uh, in the West, the greatness of the world was created by the intellect. And you look at Plato, Aristotle, Dante, the Renaissance artists, Newton, Galileo, Locke, Hegel, Kant, Goethe, you know, every Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, that that intelligence can create great things. Well, those are rarities, and unfortunately, those are rare. Those are rarities, and if you want to get ahead today, um, imitate those who are ahead. People never give their opinions. People never share their real views. People go along with the party system. Okay. Um, okay, my first example. Um, I was a young, brash PhD student who was given the opportunity to teach a course at the Atlantic School of Theology. I was about 30. I'm guessing I was about 30. Um, and I taught a course there. It was really nice. It was great. Students were awesome. And then I went to a talk one evening, and and the talk was being presented by some organization. Now, the Atlantic School of Theology is a ecumenical college. It was created by the United Church of Canada, the Anglican Church of Canada, and the Catholic Church in Canada. And it was sort of a ministry sort of place. Um, Now, it was dominated by the Protestants, and in this case, the president, I guess, was a member of the United Church of Canada. I'm guessing. Doesn't really matter, because they're all the same. Everybody's the same, and that's one of the lessons that I'll give you. Everybody's the same. Whether you're Catholic or Protestant, whether you're a man or woman, whether you're young or old, whether you're rich or poor, everybody's the same. It's human nature, and it's not pretty. Human nature is not pretty. Um, so this was a presentation by a Democrat Party supporting person, and they were talking about basically, this was back, if you can remember, this is back in uh, George W. Bush's presidential campaign. So we're looking at roughly, I'm just guessing, like 2004-ish. I can't remember who he was running against at that point. 2004. Yeah, it was definitely around, I think it was that election. That election, it could have been 2008 one. Doesn't really matter. But anyway, during the question period after the talk, I made a point. It was basically saying that this Christian group that this speaker was representing was allied with the Democrat Party, and the Democrat Party supports abortion, and blah blah blah. Well, that wasn't well received. The president called me in. Well, I guess it was the president. Anyway, he called me into his office at some subsequent point and said it was rude. It was rude of me to point that out. And I said, well, I mean, this is a university, and I thought, free exchange of ideas was important, but it wasn't. It was rude. It was rude to disagree with somebody who had already stacked the deck and said Christianity and the Democrat Party are one and the same, and you can't wedge those two apart. To try and wedge them apart, to disagree with that was being rude. And I wasn't rude, but I was just disagreeing. So that was my first example. Okay, so other organizations, if you think you get off the hook because that was an ecumenical college, and ecumenical colleges are the worst thing ever, my examples hit on every kind of institution. Okay, the the next one I want to point out is a non academic example. I was working at a place in Toronto with one of my brothers, and we had a friendly relationship with a lot of the people there, and people knew that I was a theology student, and I was a whatever Catholic, strong Catholic, blah blah blah. So just out of the blue one day, this lovely young woman, not much younger than me. I was probably late 20s, and she was probably mid 20s, mid to early 20s. She said to me, just sort of out of the blue, she's very beautiful. She said, "What you wear doesn't say anything about who you are." Okay, and this was a girl who liked to wear, you know, uh, revealing clothing, to say the least, and she could pull it off, believe me. And so she said that kind of out of the blue and without nuance or without context. I said, yeah, it does say something about you. That's all I said. But that was the end of our friendship. I never told her what it says about you. I did say, however, that it does say something about you. Again, I didn't offer what it was, but she would never talk to me again after that. So there's one thing. People seem like they're open to exchange and they're open to conversation until they're not. Okay. So the next example I want to give is to another university. This is Sacred Heart University in Connecticut. I taught a few courses there online for the college for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And the students were awesome. Most of the faculty were really kind, really nice people. Um, but I, it was, I quickly learned that the US is almost in as bad a position, or if not worse position than Canada is. And in this case, um, it was the problem was that what what students couldn't be taught, basically. You can't hold students to academic standards. So basically, it consolidated for me, and this is why I haven't pursued any other teaching opportunities, is that you can't teach. If you believe in your craft, for instance, if you believe in truth, in philosophy, in exchange and growth and ideas, the universities are not the place for that. And basically, in this case, it was that you can't teach because what's most important is the students are happy. Students are made happy by good grades because these students, for instance, at Sacred Heart University, were paying something like $30,000 a year. So one of those students was more important to the school than I was because I was being paid. I was losing the money, the school money, whereas these people were giving $30,000 to the school. So my director, the head of the department, basically said, in so many words, give everybody an A or you're fired. Okay. And well, there you have it. What's the point? Did I go to school? Did I what did Plato give birth to me when I was 15 in 1990 to just become someone who hands out A's for nothing? No. So if you have any kind of self-respect, any professionalism, any professional standards or respect, then you can't teach in a university. Okay. Um, Now you say, okay, Colin, the first one was a liberal example. The second one was a liberal example. The third one was a liberal example. So now I'll give you a conservative example. Um, I taught for 5 years at another college, a conservative Catholic college, and just in my little area here. And I got a lot of friction right away. Now, again, I was always the most conservative person that I knew in any situation. All the trouble I got into in my life up to that point was because I was too conservative. My theology was too regressive, too conservative. Now, at this college, I was being persecuted because I was too liberal. So you can never make anybody happy, right? So in this case, without getting into the nitty gritties, um, I was called a lot of things, and my theological knowledge is it's pretty good. Okay, I'm a pretty smart guy, and I'm pretty well read, pretty learned fellow. And to have students call you a heretic is something, um, especially when you've already gotten you've already suffered persecution for the faith. Then to get it from the other side is really surprising and hurtful. Um, and that's when I learned that even so-called conservative Catholics are not open to a fair exchange of ideas. Okay, so that was when I realized that people were going behind my back, not to debate me, not to say, "Hey, you said this. Hey, what do you think about this?" and blah blah blah, which is what I wanted to do. That was what I wanted to do my whole life, was to debate, was to talk, was to learn. So um, that's when I realized that even so-called strong Catholics, conservatives, Orthodox Catholics are just as flawed and just as human as the liberals we had always excoriated. Okay, that they were as petty and as small-minded and as uh, sniveling and draconian and bureaucratic as the next as the liberal, and there was always, and that's the thing with these ideological debates, is that the thought is that one side is not just um, on the side of truth, but it's more importantly, it's on the side of virtue. Okay, and that truth and virtue are correlated. So if you have the right idea about the gospel, then you are morally transformed by it. Well, even though I don't identify as either group anymore, I know that the conservatives are correct about what their religion teaches, but it doesn't mean that they are any more virtuous and less petty and less scheming and immoral. So and to me, it was always the distinction between, does the truth speak or does power speak? Do you go um, and that was what I could never get my head around, is that an appeal to power. So going through back channels to discredit somebody, to their boss, is the sign of somebody's of in my mind, an invirtuous person. Is a coward and somebody who doesn't have probably doesn't have the intellectual capacity to deal with me, so they have to go through a back route and uh, make an appeal through power. Well, that's what Marxists do. That's not supposed to be what Christians do. Okay, so that was another example. Uh, a more recent example was my realization, and I worked for a newspaper, a small community newspaper over the last year or so, and in this case, I was making a sort. I wrote an editorial that talked about the machinations of the gay. What did I call them? It wasn't of the gay ideologues. The what's the word I'm looking for? The gay activists. Now, I'm making a distinction, and I made the distinction in the editorial between homosexuals and the gay activist lobby. Those are not the two of the same things. They're not the same thing. And that's the problem with the lobby, is they can't allow you to make that distinction, because that invalidates their representation, their claim to representation. It's kind of like the Democrat. It's like when Joe Biden said, "If you don't vote for me, you're not black." Well, if you're not a gay activist, then you're not gay. Okay, so I was making a distinction that the whole point of the whole point of the my editorial was that I was responding to a criticism my very traditional community received, and I said our community is a very welcoming place. I've lived here now for a decade and a half, and I have heard no occasions where anybody was attacked or persecuted because they were homosexuals. Okay, this is a very strong Christian community, very strong Catholic community, but it's also a very normal community as well. And the homosexual political wing don't like the fact that there are Christians at all in the world, and that there's so many conservative Christians, traditional Christians in my community. That just can't be to them. So I made a distinction. I said that anyway, this was no bueno, and I received a great deal of criticism, and the nuances of my argumentation, and they weren't that nuanced, were completely overridden. And I saw, well, you know what? I can't speak anywhere. I can't speak in a university. I can't speak in a liberal university. I can't speak in a conservative university. I can't speak in a public forum about things about which I know have a great deal of expertise. Um, so what's left? What's left? I'll give two more examples of what's left. So um, I recently had to change my Twitter account because there too I had the mistake of speaking my mind. And speaking your mind is great, but mine wasn't anonymous or anything. I use Twitter to promote this YouTube channel. I use Twitter to promote, um, my writing and so on. And so it's difficult for someone today to make a distinction between their private life and their personal life, and or their professional life and their personal life. And with stuff like Twitter and Facebook and even YouTube, it's really hard to keep those lines, to keep those worlds separate. And so with Twitter, I realized that well, the thing with Twitter I realized was that Twitter isn't a place for intellectual exchange. Okay, that Twitter doesn't ask for your credentials. Twitter doesn't ask for how many books you've read, doesn't ask what your profession is, doesn't ask what degrees you have, what's your field of expertise. Doesn't do that. Everybody is allowed to assert an opinion, and evidently they all carry the same weight. In one sense, of course, you have to you have to be a left wing extremist if you want to, thrive on Twitter. So I recently realized that it doesn't matter what you say on Twitter because there's no way to differentiate views. So a person who has no education and has read nothing feels that they can speak to somebody who has a great deal of education. So to me, that was I learned then that it's like, well, there's no distinction between teacher and student, so why bother? Okay, and it is why bother. So otherwise, you engage yourself in a shouting match, and I'm not interested in shouting matches. So I see how long this video is coming now, and I'm in the dark. So this is definitely going to have to be at least a two-parter, which is good, which is great. Um, so I had to change my Twitter, and I now am resolved only to use my Twitter to promote my books and my videos. So I'm not going to offer any controversial opinions, and that's what my Twitter bio says. I say I'm interested in this, this, and this. No politics. So if I can exercise any self control, and it's easier when you don't drink. I don't drink. I haven't drunk in like 6 months. It's easier to control this thing when you don't drink anything. Okay, so it's when you're up at night and you're feeling whatever, you're feeling good, throwing back a few beers, that your tongue gets a little bit loose. So my resolve is to just use my new Twitter just to promote my intellectual products. Okay, and that's all I am. I'm an intellectual producer. And so comparable to the Twitter thing is Facebook. And Facebook's been a problem for me for a number of years because I used to be a very strong, um, I don't know what you would call it, but crusader for Catholicism. And I used Facebook for that and to promote my beliefs and so on. And you get in a lot of fights on Facebook because, your friends might be of the same mind as you, but your friends' nephews or cousins or friends or workmates, there's no predicting that. I mean, you could have said the very wrong thing, the very thing that person's against. So Facebook has been a funny thing for me, and about a year, about 2 years ago now, I shut out every non-family member from my Facebook account and made it private. Now, I think I'm gonna reverse that, and the and I to promote my book, to promote my books, and, we'll see how that goes. Again, I don't know if I can keep my opinion to myself. It's really difficult. I found myself the other night looking up, statistics on COVID and stuff like that, and I was like, I want to offer my opinion on certain things. And I know that that's just don't do it, dude. Just don't do it. You can't do it. Because everything you say will be misconstrued. And even if it's not misconstrued, your opinion will be invalidated and will be taken as a sign of your immorality by some people. So if you believe in masking, then you're this. If you don't believe in masking, then you're this. We all know how the game is played. Okay. And people, and this is the fact, and this is the bottom line. This is the thing I'll go back to once more. Um, People don't deserve their intelligence. People don't deserve their freedoms, you know, and that's a shame. Or not all people do. Um, People are very irresponsible, and they don't operate in good faith. Okay, operating in good faith means I will interpret your view as as generously as possible until you give me a reason not to. Okay, if you say such and such, and I think, well, that could mean that or that could mean that, I should put a benevolent interpretation on it until I ask you about it, until you say, what your reasons are, until I give you the opportunity to elucidate more clearly. Okay. Um, so, okay, so that was quite an introduction in a sense. So maybe I'll call this. Now I'm at 36 minutes here, and I'm getting tired. And I'm in the dark. Okay, yeah, I can see you can still see me because of the light of my computer, and the mosquitoes are coming out and starting to attack me. Blech. Anyway, so let's call this part one. Is it possible to speak anymore? And this was my personal experience. So tomorrow or whenever I do my follow-up video, is it possible to speak part two? Then I will talk about some of the tactics you can use to navigate this world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why. Why is all this happening now? Why is this attack on free speech coming now? So, those are the two topics I want to talk about next time. So, anyway, I really thank you guys for listening, for tuning in, for looking at this video. Um, and I see I haven't made a video in this in my talks on various topics for quite a while. So, this is the first one in some time, in a couple of years, I guess. And I'm wondering about my ability to talk about issues on this channel. I know I do. Anyway, we're going to talk about that next time. Anyway, once again, thank you guys so much. Make sure you buy my book, Go Out From Us, available on Amazon now. And I really appreciate you all. Have a good night.